What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support the channel, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to support the channel, additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Now let's get into today's budget build with Hansk. And forget what this guy says. This guy just says draw 3 cards a turn, because that's exactly what we're going to do with this guy. There's basically 4 parts to this deck. The first thing we need to do is sweep the board consistently. So we're going to play a lot of cards that just deal 2 damage to every creature consistently. We have a lot of ways to untap our commander to make sure we can kill them that way if we need to. Additionally, the next part is just playing additional lands, right? So we are going to shove in a landfall strategy. Turns out when you're drawing 3 cards a turn, you're going to draw more lands than everybody else. So this deck really has the ability to catapult itself ahead of the opponents just because the amount of ramp and card draw we have. Additionally, we're going to punish our opponents for their creatures dying. How dare they just sacrifice 3 zombies every turn, essentially, right? So we're going to punish them for that, deal damage to them for that. This is really going to be an aristocrat strategy's worst nightmare, because when they're doing the thing they want to do, they're going to be taking a lot of damage. Last but not least, we are going to shove an Anthem strategy in this deck. Anthems are cheap, very budget, and additionally, it's just going to help us out whenever we're playing stuff like Earthquake, so we can just keep doing more and more damage to our opponents the bigger our creatures get. That way our board's ineffective, and we're going to try to turn it into somewhat of a one-sided board wipe. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's start off by drawing those glorious 3 cards a turn. Crush the Weak is going to be amazing. Volcanic Fallout, Into the Fire, and Pyroclasm is kind of the route we're taking with this. Just very low to the ground, very cheap spells. Just cast them and boom, we get to draw 3 cards. 2 mana draw 3 cards? That's insane. Rolling Earthquake and Earthquake are going to be some solid game enders, as well as doing the same thing as the other cards, right? Early game, we draw 3 cards off these. Late game, we're trying to kill people. Sting, the Glinting Dagger, is going to be really efficient in this deck, making it to where we can always kill those 3 zombies. Ironcrag Pyromancer, Sereth the Viper's Fang, Elmar, and Seeker of the Skybreak are going to make it to where we can kill 2 zombies instead of 1. Drawing 2 cards a turn, still pretty powerful. Aether Flash will go ahead and just axe all of the zombies on ETB. Now this will kill your creatures too, but as long as we have an Anthem on the battlefield, we should be able to make this a one-sided hate piece. To the Anthems, we have Sylvan Anthem and Gaia's Anthem, super solid. Boartusk Liege, this can give some of our creatures +2, which is absolutely broken. Loyal Guardian takes a little bit to turn online, but once he gets there, it's actually pretty busted. Uvenwald Oddity not only gives a solid buff once we flip it, it's also going to give all of our creatures trample and haste. This guy's going to be one of the ways we can easily end the game. Glorious Sunrise is super flexible. It's not an Anthem, so to speak, but it does give us trample, gives us +1/+1, it gives us mana, card draw, whatever we need. Defiler of Vigor, another solid way to buff our entire board state. Decree of Savagery can straight up end the game. If we go wide enough, or if we get Avenger of Zendikar or Phylath on the battlefield, now all of those plant tokens are going to be massive, and we're just going to end the game out that way. Phylath and Avenger of Zendikar are also just going to be amazing in this deck because of all the Anthems. So now not only do we have a viable way to buff up those plant tokens without landfall effects, they're just going to get big if we have enough Anthem effects on the battlefield, and it can cause us to win the game. Now let's punish our opponents by dealing a ton of damage to them. Rage Thrower, now we're going to get to throw 2 damage at someone every time one of their creatures dies, so it's basically going to be 6 damage a turn. Pretty busted. Repercussions is going to be insane in this deck. It really just speeds the game along, dealing damage to everybody. Now be careful with your Earthquake effects and your Blasphemous Acts, but I'm pretty sure you get to stack the Blasphemous Act triggers. So in a scenario where your opponents have enough creatures to kill themselves, you can stack the Blasphemous Act triggers to where you win the game. So again, this is kind of a 2-card win combo with the right board state, so that's pretty busted on its own. And then we're going to punish our opponents for letting us kill their zombies. And that's kind of how I would word it to them whenever you're doing this. Like, this is really your fault for having all those zombies. Yeah, that'll make them happy. Dingus Staff, just a solid 2 damage to their face whenever a creature they control dies. Vicious Shadows is insanely busted. The top end of this card is someone's taking 21 damage. That's insane. Great Bow Doan, this one's pretty solid. It's just another way to deal damage using our commander, and then it makes him really hard to block additionally. Moving on to the core of the deck, we have Baloth. This guy's going to goad all the creatures with less power than him, so this is where the Anthem effect comes into play, and then you can just wait for our opponents to swing out with all their zombies, and depending on which ones don't die, you just snipe them with your commander and get some free treasure tokens. Vondrus, Rage of Ancients, this guy's just here to trigger whenever we're blowing up everybody else's board. While we're blowing up everybody else's board, we're just making some 5/4 dragons because that seems fair to me. Omnath, Locus of Rage is going to be another solid way we can take control of the game. It is not hard to get a ton of lands on the battlefield because of the amount of cards we are drawing. Once this deck gets online, it's pretty insane, and casting him is not going to be hard at all. Bio Waste Blob comes down early. It is kind of slow, but with our Anthem effects, once it starts going, it gets kind of insane and people will have to start paying attention to it. Reap has a very amazing low end. At the low end, we're returning 3 cards from our graveyard to our hand, so that's pretty insane. Seasons Past, just another way to get cards from our graveyard to our hand. Eternal Witness, same thing. Backdraft Hellkite, sometimes we need another effect to wipe the board, and Backdraft Hellkite can get us there. Swift of Boots to protect our commander. Joriel as a solid game ender. Again, I would not play her unless you had an Anthem effect, you know, just because we don't want her dying. But again, we get massive hands in this deck and a lot of mana, so it's going to be very easy to end out the game once she hits the field. Rishkar's Expertise, mostly just because it's super budget, and then we are running Ripjaw Raptor, kind of the same thing, right? Whenever we're casting those spells that deal 2 damage to every creature, we just get to draw an additional card. So now instead of drawing 3 cards, we're drawing 4 cards. We are incredibly greedy. Brass's Tunnel Grinder, this is kind of making it to where if you don't get your key pieces, you can easily throw this on the battlefield, get rid of everything you don't need, and draw into new usable cards. Moving on to ramp, we have Horse Specs. This guy gets massive very fast, and then we can add a ton of mana to our mana pool using that tap ability. Mana Geyser, another way to get some insane mana. This is going to be the way we can kind of close out the game using something like an Earthquake. Just remember, make sure your life total is higher than your opponent's. Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth, really solid ramp that aren't creatures, that way we can easily start wiping the board. I do include Leonward Elves and Incubation Druid. You know, Leonward Elves is going to get the axe if we do have to start wiping the board, but an early commander is just too good to say no to, right? And then Incubation Druid we can easily make big enough to dodge those board wipe effects. Azusa Lost But Seeking, again, another one you're probably not going to want to throw on the battlefield until you have an Anthem effect, but once you get there, this girl's insane for our landfall synergies. Summer Bloom and Druid class are also going to help us with our landfall synergies, just giving us more landfall effects. Goblin and Archomancer puts in some insane work, especially in a Gruul deck. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Rampant Growth, just some solid things to not only ramp us, but again, really helps the landfall strategy of this deck. Moving on to removal, we have Chaos Warp and Beast Within, solid to get rid of any permanents causing us issues. Nature's Claim for the artifacts and enchantments. We have Gorgon's Head just to give our commander Death Touch, and then he can just snipe away anything we want. And then we have Nissa. I'm not even going to explain her because everybody no, I'm joking. The Phyrexian version is the cheapest version, so that's why this is here. But this girl is going to be amazing. Not only do we get a giant body every turn, we get some solid removal, and then we get a massive pump effect to end out the game. This one's going to be very good in the deck. Blasphemous Act is going to be amazing here. Again, it can kill the table with repercussions. Just make it to where you die last, right? And then we have Azuri's Predation. This card is insane with Anthem effects because those beasts are going to enter as bigger creatures and they can eat more things. Not to mention this can just wipe the board and then we win the next turn. It's a very flexible card that puts in some work. Before you go, I gotta mention 2 cards, Oxynil and Pyrohemia. Now, these cards are not budget, but they're amazing in the deck. One, Oxynil is going to get massive because of our Anthem effects, and it's just going to allow us to deal a ton of damage to our opponents. And then over here, Pyrohemia, we have a solid way to consistently kill those 2 zombies. So if you really wanted to upgrade this deck a bit, including these cards could really get you there. I figured I'd give you guys a little something extra for watching the entire video. With that being said, I would like to thank my patrons. Newsome, Excessum, Chicken Salad, you guys really keep the channel going, along with all my other patrons. I really appreciate what you guys do to support the channel. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.